everybody to the Thursday edition of the Daily Cheat Sheet. Tucker Carlson did a interview the other night with Ted Cruz, Senator Ted Cruz. And if you catch the tail end of it, Ted Cruz kept on pushing Tucker basically on being a Russian sympathizer, a Russian propagandist. And it's very telling that Tucker at the end said, Russia's economy's fine. Everything's good there. And today, the Russian finance minister came out and said, we're essentially going broke. Our economy is bust. And Golan, I couldn't help but think of who is this guy doing talking points for? We know he's doing talking points for Iran right now, since the Ayatollah literally almost paraphrased or quoted what he called Trump being a warmonger. And now he's obviously doing the same thing with Russia. Whose side is this guy on?
You know, I think we can talk about Russia, we can talk about Iran, we can talk about all of the Qatar, all the places that Tucker recently has been, let's just be honest, shilling for. And I think that it all has one consistent theme to it. They are enemies of the United States. They're enemies of America. They're enemies of the West. They're enemies of democracy. The concept that he basically is propping up these regimes, whether it's by trying to convince people not to have them attack, whether it's by trying to convince everyone that they're doing just fine, whether it's by trying to convince everybody that they're not as bad as you think they are and they're just misunderstood, or whatever bullshit propaganda he's been spewing, or even what he did with Ted Cruz, where he asks irrelevant, shallow, ridiculous, silly questions as gotcha questions to deflect from any kind of sensitive conversation. I mean, could you imagine something more ridiculous than having the opportunity to talk to someone who has been, up until now, one of the most vocal opponents of Russia and communism and Iran and all of the rest, and instead of asking, what do you think the policy should be? Or what do you think about them getting a nuclear program? Or what do you think about them lobbing indiscriminate rockets into civilian areas of one of our allies? Instead, the question is, how many cows does the country have? You know, what's their primary export when it comes to drinks? Like these silly nothing questions like what's the population or what's the percentage of people that are Persian? That's obfuscation. That is not enlightenment. And ultimately, all it is doing is basically pointing a giant flashing red arrow at Tucker that just says culpable, that just says shill, that just says I am a bought and paid for operative of anti-American interests.
Well said, Mend. And I quote, Russia is on the verge of recession, says Putin government.
Tucker's lost his way. I mean, it's obvious. The guy started out on, I believe it was MSNBC. Then he made his way over to Fox, built up a huge following because he had great talking points. I mean, the issues that he would shine a spotlight on were important and people wanted to learn more about it and see his take. And now he's gone off the rails. And I believe he's just eroding and losing his own credibility. It's sad to watch this train wreck happen, but it's happening.
Golan, I think he's 100% correct. A lot of us we're sort of parallel to Tucker. But many of us were like Tucker. We agreed we thought we should invade Iraq. We were going on the intelligence of every foreign government in the world. And we made a mistake. And just like Tucker, we've all acknowledged our mistake. But his overcorrection, as I brought up yesterday, as Ted Cruz brought up to him, has been this complete bizarre shift that I really can't explain. So I get it that people want to call him, whether it's an anti-Semite, but it goes much deeper than this. This goes much deeper to not liking Jews or whatever. He's getting to the point of not liking America. When you talk about how well the shopping centers look, the food stores look, or the train stations look, when you're going that way, it's like that movie, The Interview, with Seth Rogen and who I can't stand, and James Franco, who's been canceled. And that scene was directly in The Interview. It was like they watched the interview and they said, Tucker, come over here. Go on.
You know, Mendes pointed out that he might not always have had, and you have as well, not always have had these backers that made him want to say certain things. But what he's doing right now, there is no way around it. It's almost like the officials in Russia forgot that their operative Tucker is putting out talking points, because before you could say maybe he was uninformed, or maybe he didn't realize what he was saying when he was complimenting something while ignoring something else. Or maybe you could say he just appreciated certain aspects of the society, like their aversion to crime or whatever. But when he says Russia's economy is thriving and their own official says they're on the brink of recession, you know there's something wrong. That is a straight up talking point. When he says, quote, sanctions haven't worked, Russia just adapted, that is something that he is trying to get people to stop doing. He's trying to say sanctions didn't work, so why don't we just go ahead and shut those down? But the reality is Russia is burning out their own economy to keep the war machine running. And you can look at the Financial Times from this month to see that they haven't adapted. They funneled 1/3 of their budget into endless war. They've lost access to foreign markets. They're begging the central bank right now to stop strangling growth for them with absurd interest rates. That's not adaptation. That's like bragging your house is warm instead of acknowledging that it's on fire. This is happening over and over again. So when Tucker is pushing these talking points so obviously against the truth, it no longer looks like a mistake, and it no longer looks like he's maybe just focused on one section. It looks like what it is, straight up propaganda.
Mend, I want to correct myself on something I said yesterday, and I really want to defend Ted Cruz right now, because Tucker is a master class. He could give a master class on debate. But when you're thrown certain things as you're speaking to somebody and you're in total shock over what they're saying, it becomes extremely difficult in a moment's time to put your thoughts together. And Tucker says these things that are just so shocking that I don't know. It's nearly impossible in that moment to debate it.
I don't know anything that he's been saying that's shocking. I mean, the guy basically is taking the Qatar line and he's running with it. So if you look at it through the lens of, if you look, well, shocking for what Tucker used to be, but in recent months, this has just been nonstop with him. So if you look at the point of view, or if you view it through the lens of what would Qatar want to say in that instance, Tucker says it. And then the same thing happens with the Russians, and I'm not sure what is going on with his Russian, with his pro-Russian stance. I get it. You could be against the Ukraine war. You could be against sending billions of our dollars to Ukraine while not making the Europeans pay their fair share of that war. It's on their soil. All those things are valid, but you don't have to take the side of the Russians. So where he oversteps his line is he starts running cover and pushing propaganda for the Russians, when I think most people that would be anti that war, anti-funding the war, or anti-pushing the Russians into a corner where they might use a nuke. I mean, there's a lot of valid reasons to be hesitant to go along with the war in Ukraine. Not that I am absolving the Russians for starting the war, but it is definitely not an unprovoked war. We did provoke with our expansion of NATO. So there's a lot going on there, but you don't have to take the Russian side. There is a rational middle side. Tucker just doesn't take it. So, you know, with his pro-Qatar jolt that he took recently, that explains his view. If you view what he's saying through that lens, it all makes sense. And the Russian thing, he's vehemently anti the Ukraine war. Fine. But you don't have to be pro-Russian. That part just doesn't make any sense.
Golan, I have to push back on Mend a little bit with what he just said, because the United Nations thing was, I mean, the NATO thing was not on the table in 2014. I don't believe in this talking point of this is the reason why he invaded Ukraine. I 100% agree with Ted Cruz. I mean, I think if you just look at every situation that happened once we left Afghanistan the way we did, everybody seized on that opportunity as weakness. So I don't think it had anything to do with the NATO or the United, whatever. I think just we got to take Putin as word. He wants to conquer that region.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't hidden that necessarily. You know, the thing about it is there's always an excuse, right? Right now, I was watching the news yesterday, and I don't remember what, I think maybe CNN, I don't remember. But it was the same old bullshit where they bombed a hospital in Israel. I'm sure we'll talk about it. And we can talk about the miracle that happened there. But the point is that when they bombed the hospital, one of my friends texted me immediately. Now they can say in the media, they can talk about how terrible it is they bombed the hospital, because all they were talking about was all the hospitals that were bombed in Gaza. And immediately the first comment that he got when he tried to put that on social media was, Well, no, this is in response to Israel bombing. Oh, there's always an excuse. There's always a reason. And you can do this for every conflict all over the world. And by the way, some of those excuses may even sound valid. Some of them may even be valid. They may not justify reaction. So when you say, and I'm not taking you to task for this because you're not the only person who thinks this way, but the idea that our expansion with NATO is the reason why. He's been trying to take these regions for a long time, long before this conversation started. This is a convenient excuse today. And the next convenient excuse is Ukraine is filled with Nazis. And the next, and it may be, but that's not the reason he's taken Ukraine. And the next convenient excuse is that they're the colonizers. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I wonder where you read that and used it in your propaganda book. Each thing has become an excuse. And by the way, Tucker himself uses an excuse. What's his excuse? For not telling the truth and being able to do it blatantly on camera on a regular basis. He doesn't say he's a reporter. He's not a reporter, so he's not beholden to the truth. He describes himself as a political commentator. He is a media personality. He is a pundit. He is not a journalist, which means he is not investigating anything. He is not, and deliberately so, doing anything objective. Years ago, I worked with the filmmaker Michael Moore, who I think is an absolute anti-Semite lunatic. But I worked with him on a film called Bowling for Columbine. And one of the things he said to myself and his team was, I don't consider myself a documentary filmmaker. Why not? You're getting Oscars for documentaries because I'm not objective. And when I'm making my documentaries, he said, if I suddenly stumble across a piece of information that negates my thesis, I don't include it because I'm not making a truthful statement. I am making a propaganda document that backs up what I already think. And that's what Tucker does. So Tucker, whether it's embracing Russia, whether it's downplaying the threat of China, whether it's whitewashing Qatar, all of the above, it's not a lie. That's what he wants to do. And he's backing it up because he's not a reporter.
Okay. There's a guy named Burns. You might remember him. He was CIA director under Joe Biden. He was warning about the provocative effect of NATO expansion on Russia since 1995. When did Russia take Crimea? 2016? 2014? All right, this guy warned about it in 1995. That's when Burns, a political officer in the U.S. Embassy in Moscow, reported to Washington that hostility to early NATO expansion is almost universally felt across the domestic political spectrum in Russia. So he was in Russia. He said, every single Russian, the pro-West Russians, the communist Russians, all of them were united against NATO expansion. You know what happened 2 weeks after that communique went out? We said that we're going to invite Ukraine to join NATO. We were going to invite all these other countries to join NATO. So this horseshit that it is unprovoked and all that other nonsense that you want to talk about is absolute bullshit. Call a spade a spade. Let's be honest. That's what we do on this show. We are honest, right? So let's not run cover for the fucked up shit that previous administrations did that provoked them. I don't care that,
What year was that then?
1995.
1995.
Look at
30 years.
So, yeah. So
I understand. No, I know who Burns is, and I know that. And I know that Putin, from the moment he came into office, which admittedly was about half a decade after that, he was already on the train of expansion when he became prime minister, not president, excuse me, when he became prime minister in 99. But he was also talking about reasserting control over former Soviet spaces long before that. Even before he became prime minister, he was already talking about centralizing power. Long before that, he called the collapse of the Soviet Union the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. Long before that, this is something that, while I understand that he is reacting and doing the things that are provocative, he was going to do those things anyway, is my point. These excuses may also be reason, but they are also excuses because he was never not going to try to consolidate USSR back to what it used to be.
And I just have to say, men, can I just say one thing? Because you believe something, I'm not saying your idea is bullshit. I'm not. I'm saying there's I could see your point of view, but there are opposing points of view that's how I see the situation. That's how I objectively see the situation. You objectively see the situation differently. It doesn't mean either of our opinions are bullshit.
So
it could just be the way we look at the situation.
So first off, opinions aren't you, so I don't judge you by your opinions. Opinions change. But this is not an opinion. What I'm saying is fact. The fact is that William J. Burns, the guy who later became our CIA director, was a field station officer in Russia, and he sent a communique in 1995 saying, stop talking about NATO expansion because it's pissing off the entire Russian population, everyone in government. And what did we do? We talked about further NATO expansion. Now, two things could be right at the same time. One, that we did provoke by expanding NATO. And two, Putin always had these ideas of expansionism, and he always wanted to go back to the great glory of the Soviet Union. Both things could be right. One doesn't negate the other. So I do think that Putin views the fall of the Soviet Union as a catastrophe. He did see it correctly, that when they were extremely weak, the entire West took advantage of them, chopped up that country, let a lot of other countries be formed out of what was formerly the Soviet Union, and they got zilch in return. They got nothing. So does he have a right to be pissed about some of those things? Probably. Does he have a right to invade those countries? No, he does not. I am not absolving him of that, the catastrophe that he brought on his people and the people of Ukraine by starting that war. So all of those things could be correct. It's called being honest. I am not going to change my values and change reality.
You're implying that I'm not being honest. You're giving your honest assessment of the situation, and I'm giving my honest assessment of the situation. You're going to cite some guy from 30 years ago who ran the CIA.
Not some guy. Yes, not some guy. Okay, whoa. Hold on.
But by the
specifically?
way, I want to throw something else out there. No, to this point, real quick. Sorry. I want to throw something else out there. It's not that you're telling the truth or not telling the truth. It's important to note this. You are stating your theory based on a theory that somebody else stated. And I understand that he held high positions and all of that. But ultimately, even if, by the way, Bill Burns also had a bunch of theories that didn't pan out. Bill Burns also said Iran, which we're dealing with right now, could be managed through back channel diplomacy. He was one of the big proponents of the 2015 Iran nuclear deal and said diplomatic channels will be totally fine. It'll de-escalate all the tensions. He was wrong. He also was wrong about Havana. He also was wrong about, by the way, he even was wrong about this because he said that, yes, it would inflame tensions, but Russia would crumble. He said a lot of things. And by the way, that doesn't make him bad. The job of people like him, analysts like him, is to come up with theory upon theory upon theory, and then we work towards whatever our counter is for that potential inevitability. But they're all just potential. And so the idea of saying this is the reason why he invaded, I'll tell you what, if I was Putin, and since basically I was a KGB agent in the 80s, watching the Berlin Wall fall and thinking, God damn it, they fucked my country over, and I can't wait until I get into power and put it back together again. And then I hear Bill Burns say, hey, if we do the NATO thing, it's going to inflame tensions and Russia's going to want to do stuff. I'm like, well, guess who just got the perfect excuse? Thank you very much. And then I would say, it's because of the NATO thing. And no one's going to argue with me. I'm not saying that's what happened, but I'm saying it could have been what happened. So it's not that you're lying or Judah's lying or nobody's lying. We're all just positing. And it's important to note that because here on this show, what we don't do is talk about the rumor, but we do posit theories, and all of our theories are valid in this case.
Okay, so there's a couple of things right there that I'd like to address. One is, Bill Burns wasn't giving a theory. He was reporting to Washington, hey guys, this talk about NATO is pissing off everybody in the Soviet Union. You probably do not want to do that. And 2 weeks later, we invited a whole bunch of countries to join NATO. I think it was specifically, we started talking about the Ukraine, but other countries. So that's not a theory, and it's not a hypothesis, and it wasn't him stretching anything. It was just, he just delivered a little tidbit of information saying, universally, everybody here is against the expansion of NATO. It's a red line. The name of the communique was Niet means Niet. No means no. So that's number one.
But he also said that he thought that it would inflame tensions and it would escalate and all this stuff. They put people against the border. But he didn't. He actually, as part of his analysis, said Putin will stop short of a full invasion.
All I'm saying is the guy warned us and he was ignored. And then later on, Putin unjustifiably invaded Ukraine. Those are the facts. Now, if Russia was going to put missiles in Mexico or Canada, do you think we'd stand for that? Like, what the fuck are we even talking about here?
The metaphor that you gave, or the comparison that you gave, you were saying if Russia wanted to line up missiles on the Mexican border or whatever, NATO doesn't mean that Ukraine starts lining up missiles. NATO means that Ukraine has joined a collective defense unit. So if someone fucks with Ukraine, there are other people who will step in to collectively protect them. That's not the same thing. And Putin's big argument against Ukraine joining NATO wasn't because he was worried about what was going to be on his borders. It was because he wanted to take over. And, you know, it wasn't an existential threat to him. It was an existential threat to his imperial worldview, the strategic concept of authoritarianly taking over the entire region. I don't understand the comparison of putting Russian missiles on Mexican land.
Well, we call them defensive assets, but we all know that once we're in a NATO country, we send in a lot of offensive material as well. We have our special forces guys in there doing all kinds of ops. So does it justify Russia invading Ukraine? No, I don't think it does. But let's not pretend that, you know, we're just big teddy bears and we're so much fun and fluffy and we won't do anything. And you guys are coming in with your sharp knives and guns and you're killing. No, not at all. If you ever want to get to peace, you have to understand the mentality of your enemy. And I'm saying this across the board. So the mentality of Hamas is genocidal. So you're never going to get to peace with them. We understand their mentality. They need to be wiped out. They need to be crushed, dismantled. The Russians are not genocidal. They're a bunch of criminals. It's a bunch of like gangsters. It's kind of like the Soprano family running a country with a lot of oil and a lot of money and nuclear weapons. So yes, sanctions hurt them. Things like that do hurt them, but you got to put it on enough. The Europeans that are whining and complaining about this war have given Russia more money throughout this war than America has given Ukraine by purchasing Russian oil. So I don't understand what the fuck any of this is. It's all horseshit. Keep on footing the bill, America, and we'll keep on buying oil from them, and we'll keep on demonizing them at the UN. It's a giant shit show. Like, there's so many holes in this argument about, it reminds me of everything that the insane left does with these anti-ICE riots and all that. None of it makes sense. It just, if you follow the argument through, you're like, what are you talking about? What are you guys saying?
The same could be said for what you're saying. And the reality is nobody here, none of us, wants Ukraine in NATO. America forced Ukraine to get rid of their nuclear weapons on the promise that we'd protect them. So this is one big shit show. Okay, but none of us are giving points on the left or the right, and we do have to move on because there's extremely pressing issues that are going on today. Obviously, Golan, we are living at a time where we are paralyzed by the mistakes of our past, and which goes into this discussion. We've made a ton of horrific foreign policy decisions, and we seem to be either paralyzed, and people are using that paralyzation to prevent us from actually doing something that could change history. We're talking about something that could change history right now, is ending Iran's torture over a region that's been going on for 50 years.
I could not agree more. Look, for me, this is obviously, look, I have a different relationship to this skirmish as well, because I happen to be Israeli, because I happen to be Jewish, and I have been watching Iran and all of its proxies basically swear to kill all the Jews and all the Israelis for as long as I think I've been alive. Right now, the idea of us ignoring what needs to be done today, or at the very least, even taking it off the board. The idea that someone like, as we talked about, AOC and Massey, trying to put together something that says simply cannot, no matter what, get involved with this skirmish. I was listening to Matt Walsh today, and I heard him go on a rant about how we shouldn't be going into Iran. It's not our fight. It's not our place. Other people can handle it. This is Israel's problem and all of this stuff. And if that were true, I might even agree with him. But it requires such a level of head in the sandness that it's almost staggering. To think that someone who actually does commentary for a living, and I'm not just talking about Matt, I'm talking about Matt, talking about obviously the bought and paid fors like Tucker Carlson, the grifters like Dave Smith, I'm talking about the psychos like Candace Owens and everybody in between. And by the way, I'm not going to say who, but some of the people potentially in our own government, all of those people who are saying this stuff, I mean, I'm hoping it's just head in the sand and not that they're operatives within our government that are working on behalf of anti-West institutions. But the idea that we are going to put ourselves in a foreign policy paralysis because of what previous administrations did or previous screw ups that were made is like the thing in the movie where Al from Die Hard accidentally shot a kid because he couldn't see the gun in the dark. And now he can't draw his gun anymore. So when genuine terrorists show up, he's going to have to rely on other people? No! At the end of the movie, he has to take out his gun and shoot that ballet dancer in the fucking head. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So we can't be paralyzed by the sins of the past. Otherwise, we are doomed to repeat.
I'm waiting for men to jump in.
Okay. Well, listen, I agree with a lot of what Golan just said. I don't know if it's necessarily...
By the way, just 1 second. You agree with the point I brought up. Give me some credit.
I agree with both of you guys on this, that there is some hesitancy to jump into another war. I was listening to Rand Paul talk this morning about it. And I mean, he makes some valid points, but the things that don't make sense is where they connect the dots at the end. It's like, what happens after? And what we talked about yesterday, and I think it's a great line, is there is no aftermath that is worse than Iran achieving a nuclear bomb.
Your most brilliant point of the show yesterday.
Thank you, sir. It's clear as day that those genocidal maniacs having their hands on a nuke would hold the world hostage, and they would probably use it. They believe for religious purposes that Israel must be annihilated for the 13th, I think it's the 13th prophet to return and save them or something. So they are literally dying to get that done. They don't care how many they have to sacrifice. So when you have, with the Cold War, with the Russians, we had this mutually assured destruction thing in place where, hey, you lob a nuke at us, we're going to nuke you, and everybody dies and nobody does it. With these guys, they would love to go to heaven, hell, wherever they're going. They don't value life. They actually want to get there. They believe that ideologically. So you can't use more mutually assured destruction. So what do you have to do? You have to do what Israel's doing. You kill their top generals and you take away their bombs. And then you say, now what? Or you bomb them back into the Stone Age and let them start over from scratch.
Right. You bomb them into where they're actually living in their brains, which is the Stone Age. And men, but I want to ask you, because we both were talking about this yesterday, and somebody had disagreed with me, and we've gone back and forth in our own brains on this. I do think it's extremely important to take out the Ayatollah Khomeini. For people that don't remember, when the fall of Iran actually happened in 1979 and the embassy was overrun, one of the things that they kept on using for leverage was for the Shah to be brought back to Iran so they could slaughter him. They were willing to give up the hostages at the embassy. I don't want that again. Get rid of this guy. He serves no purpose to mankind. Or send him to Russia. Whatever it is, by hook or by crook, this guy needs to go. And I said yesterday I changed my opinion from the day before. And yesterday I said it's time to take him out. I agree with that assessment today again. I am not worried. We can't think about what the fallout from that will be, since none of us know what the fallout from that will be. I just know that anything right now is better than this numbnuts on the ground.
Here's the deal, is that they are still posturing as if they're strong, as if they, hold any leverage. They have zero leverage. So taking out their top guy, which I advocated for, they should bomb him, take him out, and take out all the top guys. And then whoever's left, you say, hey, you still going to go for a bomb? Or do you want to try the peace and prosperity route?
Right.
No boots on the ground. We should have done that in Iraq. Same thing. Take out the top guys. And then whoever comes up next, say, hey, what do you think about going for the bomb? They go for it. Boom, you're out. Who's next? You do that again and again. These people need to be humiliated. They've been threatening the world. I talked about the Beirut bombing where they killed over 220 Marines. But they had over 1,000 U.S. servicemen killed with their IEDs in Iraq over the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. These people have a lot of American blood on their hands. They need to pay the price. They've never really had to pay the price. We did some sanctions and some bullshit. But no, they need to pay the price in blood with their top leadership all being decapitated.
Brilliantly said. And Golan, I want you to respond to that, but I also was going to ask you, before I forget, this Matt Walsh thing and many of these people, Do you think they actually believe this, or they're just doing this to expedite their careers? It goes where their listeners want them. And that's my honest question about somebody like Matt Walsh, because when you look at him, it's like he's one big.
You got to fill us in. What happened with Matt Walsh? What happened with Matt?
No, but
it was just the conversation. I was literally listening to his podcast, and he was going through just certain things he believes, as he does, and some of the stuff, I'm on board with. Some of the stuff, I'm like, all right, I could take or leave. But there was only one thing where I had to stop what I was doing and just shake my head and go, you actually don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And it was just this one issue, and it was the issue of Iran. The answer to your question, Judah, is that I think he believes. I think many of them don't. I think many of them are crassly using, the Dave Smiths of the world. It's whatever way the wind is going to blow. That's the way I'm going to slog my dick. But I think Matt Walsh, I think for whatever reason, he truly believes in non-interventionalism. I think he really believes that America first means America alone. And as BB said, potentially America dead. But I think he sees that as an overall good. I know that people he works with don't agree with him, and that's okay. But I think that his reasoning, and he gave a long list of reasons, were childish, were actually like infantile. He at one point, after going through his whole thing, and he's like, one of the reasons I'm told that we can do this is this won't be a years-long war. It won't be an endless thing. We can do it really quickly. And he's like, well, like a gotcha. If that's the case, then what's the big deal? Let them do it by themselves. So see, I gotcha. I still have no reason. And the only thing he didn't address is the only thing that matters, is that Iran has attacked us, has killed our soldiers, has attacked our allies, is ready to continue doing it, has announced over and over and over again that they want to do it, have been shouting genocidal slogans like death to America for as long as I can have memory, put out videos of them caressing atomic bombs as if they're their love slaves, and are actively trying to develop something now that could actually kill a bunch of people on our side. So as long as you ignore all of that, he's absolutely right. But I think he believes it. I just think he's fucking wrong.
So what I'm going to say is that BB's statement of America first and America dead is absolutely moronic. It makes no sense. And it's a terrible take. It's almost as bad as Zelensky's statement of like, we're protecting you. If not, Russia will come to America. Russia's not coming to America. What the fuck are you talking about? We have a huge ocean between us and Russia. They're not coming here. The Iranians pose a threat to our assets in the region and our allies in the region, and they want to, and they cannot have a nuke. So the answer there is America first, which is what Trump said, means no bomb for Iran. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. That is America first. America is not going to be dead by an Iranian bomb. That's not going to happen. It's going to be immigration, just like they were invading Europe. And for 1600 years, the Muslims tried to invade Europe and couldn't do it, but they figured out the end and just send them all in through immigration and they could take over. And they openly talk about it. That's their plan. So we could have the same problem here, especially with our northern neighbors, the morons up in Canada, with their open border policy and taking in unvetted Syrians and Iraqis and all kinds of other lunatics, especially the so-called Palestinians. So look at that country turn, and that's on our northern border. That's the real threat. The Iranians, America first means Iran cannot have a nuclear bomb. That's the simplest, clearest take on that thing.
Go on.
I think it's actually kind of a bad take, men, that Iran can't directly attack America or can't kind of escalate to the point where we are in an existential crisis with Iran. Maybe not today, but the whole point of what's going on right now in terms of us cutting the legs out from under them currently, whether it's nuclear or otherwise, is we're trying to prevent future issues, right? So right now, currently happening in the United States from Iran and Iran-linked groups we already have low-level stuff. We already have power grid attacks, financial system attacks. There was a defense contractor that was hacked by an Iranian group. Those are things obviously on a lower scale. You mentioned that there are going to be terrorist proxies that are at some point going to do some kind of mass casualty event that the Biden administration let in. Those are often Iranian-backed groups and Iranian-backed terrorists. Right now, we are not going to see a ballistic or a cruise missile come from Iran all the way over to the United States. That's not actually possible. But they are and have been for some time trying to put covert bases in South America and in Latin America, in Venezuela, etc. Those are places that right now don't exist, or we hope don't exist, but absolutely could be launching pads for that sort of thing. They are putting together ships and submarines. Again, currently not happening, and we monitor that stuff very carefully. But all we need is one, right? So the idea of this couldn't happen, even what they're doing in terms of drone technology, and some of that stuff is coming in from Russia, and they're selling it to China. But even drone technology smuggled into the U.S. that can be controlled, similar to actually what happened in Iran through Israel, and similar to what happened in Russia through Ukraine, could also happen. And some of those things can be serious. And if they do end up getting nuclear or biological or chemical weapons, now we're talking about something on a whole different level. And here's the thing, most pundits would say, well, that's not going to happen unless we're in an existential war. But you just said something that is 1,000% correct. These people love death more than they love life. So they don't need an existential war. If they get a hold of something like that, this actually functions towards their goal. Death to little and big. Little is Israel, big is America. And they've been saying that for decades.
So the reason that I said that Bibi's statement was asinine is that is not our threat today. And a much better case would be the one that Trump made, where he said, look, America first means they can't have a nuclear bomb. You don't even have to go into details, and you don't have to try to fearmonger by telling Americans, oh, you'll be dead. It doesn't work. So yeah, the Trump take on that, America first means Iran cannot have a nuclear bomb. It rings a lot truer to me. It just makes a lot more sense.
Listen,
that's why I don't say America dead. I say America alone, because I think that's actually the right take.
Okay, listen, both of you have brought up great points. I think it's important to note that 2 cargo planes just landed in Israel with tons of equipment, military equipment. And I want to remind everybody, this is essentially what Richard Nixon did in 1973 during the 73 war to protect Israel, going against the State Department. And I want people to know the State Department for a long time has been extremely on the opposite side of every correct move as far as everything they've ever done. So it's extremely important. I want to thank President Trump for doing this as an American and, of course, as a Jew and a Zionist. Mend is about to leave. Golan and I are going to continue for a couple seconds. The debate we had in the beginning of the show for the first 30 minutes of the show is great. It's the actual debate that Americans should have been having for the last 30 years. It's the debate Republicans should have been having with themselves for 30 years. Instead of calling people rhinos or insults or anything like that, or warmongers or hawks or doves or whatever name they wanted to put on it, they should have actually been discussing this and arguing with themselves. They didn't do that, and we're in this position, and especially in the Republican Party. I'm only speaking for the Republican Party because they refused to have the discussions that were extremely difficult to have. At the end of this, Mend and I are going to talk. Golan and I are going to talk because we're able to actually have a discussion and a debate and not take it personally. Mend, your final thoughts on that before you go?
No, listen, the internal split in the MAGA base over the attacking Iran. There was a poll that came out today. New York Post published it. 80-something% of MAGA, or 80-something% of MAGA base supports attacking Iran. So a lot of this is people with influence trying to change people's minds within that group, and it's not working. Trump is going to do, what we've seen over and over again, and it surprised me that this guy gets it right again and again and again. So have a little faith that he's going to get it right here and do the right thing. And the right thing means not allowing Iran to get a bomb, which is the thing that man has been saying for over a decade. So this isn't new. This is just fact. It's part of our national security to make sure that insane regime does not get a bomb. As far as regime change, we'll see what happens there. But no boots on the ground.
Perfectly said. We will see you in a little bit. Have a great day. And as we continue with Golan Ramraz, I'm curious about the news on the news in the BBC about the hospital attack that happened, how they are shaping it and representing it.
Well, so
reporting
it looks like they are doing what the BBC always does. They are making a case for it being something that isn't that big a deal on the world stage versus how they reported on things in the past when it came to almost a mirror exact same situation. So historically, when there was a hospital blast, if you recall, in Gaza in 2023, when everyone accused Israel of launching rockets at a hospital, And it turns out it was just Hamas lies, and yet everybody covered it anyway. The BBC was one of the greatest culprits of that. They conducted live speculation and vilified and quoted directly from the terrorists exactly what was going on, made it a really big deal. They quoted the numbers of dead, which were in the dozens. They made sure that this became something that was all about how evil it was that Israel was targeting not only civilian infrastructure, but hospitals specifically. So yesterday, a hospital, the Soroka Hospital in Israel, was hit by a rocket directly. And first, I just want to point out, because Israel is the most moral nation on earth, and that includes how they treat their civilians, how they treat their citizens, one of the things that Israel did to make sure that their citizens were safe at the time that this war was being waged by Iran, they made sure that everybody had access, as we mentioned yesterday, to security spaces, to bomb shelters, to safe rooms, etc. In the hospitals, Israel spends quite a lot of money to build almost an exact replica of the hospital under the hospital, and literally
I didn't know
underground.
that. I didn't know that.
And well, I mean, when you are constantly having rockets and missiles launched at you on a regular basis, and some people only have seconds to get to a safe room, but you have people that are in hospital beds or incapacitated in some way, or potentially even in the middle of giving birth or in the middle of surgery, what are you going to do? Those people are vulnerable. So when there are hostilities afoot, people are moved. Do you know when the building that was bombed, the one that was destroyed, the extensive damage that happened there, do you know when that building was evacuated?
Do tell.
Yesterday. I get emotional when I say this, but it is a very famous saying in Israel, and it is hard not to believe in miracles when you live in Israel. So while we're watching devastation occur, while we're watching buildings collapse and families not knowing where the members are because they're buried under rubble and all the rest, we are also in a place in Israel where a timely evacuation like that is not a coincidence. It is not seen as a coincidence, and it only reaffirms what everybody in Israel believes. It doesn't mean people aren't afraid. It doesn't mean people aren't nervous, and it doesn't mean some people don't want to leave the country. What it means is that people recognize that it's a special place, and that whether people like to hear it or not, God watches over it, because it is a place that is holy not just for the Jews, but for the Christians, for the Muslims, and for basically every major religion on earth. And it is why it is watched over. And I had a conversation just today with a friend of mine who lives there. And she said, she's pulling her hair out. She's going crazy. But the level of humor amongst the Israelis right now is at a fever pitch, because that is how we deal with trauma. And when we see stuff like this, it just reinforces that sense of humor, that lightness. My mother, as you know, and as some of our audience knows, was literally in a building that was directly hit by a ballistic missile while she was in it. She's in her 70s. And when she told me about it later, the first thing she sent me were 4 laughing emojis.
Perfectly said. And I just want to end it on this because I know Mend had to run, so he wasn't fully able to answer what I was saying. But I think it's really sad that we didn't have these arguments many years ago. I think it's embarrassing. The left obviously doesn't do it, but we're the right. We're conservatives. We're supposed to be able to have this back and forth. Listen, Barry Goldwater hated Nixon. He ended up endorsing Nixon. These people disagreed with each other on so many different things, but the discourse has changed. Debate has changed. Ben Stein often always says to me, debate is the essence of America. I don't believe that's true anymore. I just don't believe that's true. The people you bring up like Matt Walsh or Tucker or Candace or any of these people are not open to hearing. I might have learned something from men said. He could be 100% correct that that was the reason. And he didn't justify Putin's invasion. He just said that could be one of the reasons. He could be 100% correct. I could be 100% wrong. It doesn't really matter. We're in the situation. So we're arguing or debating over things that we should have debated 30 years ago. And we're in this mess right now because we were not willing to have this conversation.
Absolutely. I think you're 100% right. I think today we are in our silos. I think social media is a major part of that. And I think that what happens now is we reaffirm what we already think. and then we just dig our heels in deeper and deeper and deeper instead of listening to what anyone else has to say. In fact, what I notice, because I am someone who goes out there and debates and talks to people who have disagreements with me, what I find is a lot of the time, until I can break through, they will hear something that may be logical, maybe steeped in history, maybe steeped in evidence, maybe steeped in fact, maybe easily provable, and they still are going to make fun of it as propaganda because it's the only way that their brain can accept the fact that they have dug their heels in so deeply on something that is so clearly wrong. At the beginning of the Israel Gaza war, I was talking to someone who had been a friend of mine for decades, someone who works in the same industry that I work in, someone who I feel is, or at least I thought, very smart, certainly very learned in terms of like which university she went to and all of that. She works at a high level, and I've often been a champion of hers, or I had been early in her career. I had been someone who had been a reference for her. And she started posting very anti-Jewish, anti-Israeli propaganda online. And I reached out to her and I said, I want you to understand what you're posting is coming from. And I could show her with evidence that there were specific propaganda pieces coming directly from Hamas that she was quoting. And we went back and forth quite a little bit because she had a lot of stuff. She's African American and she was very big in the BLM movement. So it was an easy step over for her to take the hate that she learned there and just apply it because they already hated the Jews in the BLM movement. And I'll never forget. The reason I tell you the story is the sentence she said to me, and it was the end of our conversations and the end of our friendship forever, which was, Golan, what you're saying may be true. You may be able to show me evidence. You may be able to prove it without a shadow of a doubt, but don't waste it on me because I will still not believe you. That's the essence, and that's the essence of where we are today.
And I also think that's a perfect way to end the show. That really does sum it up, and it sums up so many things so many of us have gone through that are outspoken, whether it's in favor of President Trump, whether it's in favor of things that we just think are right, having nothing to do with President Trump. We've been isolated. We've been banned on many sites. You on social media, me on social media too, because on YouTube, but on dating sites, simply banned for opposing pronouns. And that's a remarkable story. And I thank you for sharing that. And on that note, I want to thank everybody for downloading us. I want to thank everybody for liking us. I want to remind people to please go to our Spotify, go to our Apple, go to YouTube, find us on YouTube at The Daily Cheat Sheet. You can find us on Substack at The Daily Cheat Sheet. You can find us all over. Just like us, love us, give us that 5 stars. And even if you hate us, you can still listen to us. And with that, good morning, afternoon, and evening world, wherever you are.